Welcome to Real Siblings, It Ain't Easy, a real estate podcast with the goal to educate, inform, and save their listeners time as they navigate the market and properties in their neighborhoods. Get ready to join real-life siblings and professional real estate advisors, Donna and Eric Seemann, as they discuss how it may be simple, but it ain't always easy.
Every time I think about the places I have known, I realize that times have changed. So I'll do what I can to make this house into a home. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, everybody. I am Donna with Keller Williams Southern Arizona, and I am here with
Eric Seemann. I'm her brother with Keller Williams Heritage in San Antonio, Texas.
And we are here with our podcast, Real Siblings, It Ain't Easy. And we've just been talking about some things that aren't easy. We're not going to go into that right now. It's way too much. What we're here to do is talk a little bit about the home where we grew up, or the homes that we lived in Northwest Ohio when we were kids, and then compare and contrast and talk about how that has affected our careers in real estate with Eric in Texas and me in Tucson.
All right, look, I know I'm supposed to, I want to interrupt that now.
Go, brother.
And I'm just going to say, look, we both know that one of the way we drive business is with for sale by owners, frequently referred to as a FSBO. And we have talked behind the scenes. It's like, I can't imagine anybody trying to do this. And with what you have going on right now with this transaction,
can you imagine?
Just going, if you were trying to do this on your own and had let somebody walk into your house and write up a contract and now have the situation you have had come up, who's going to handle that for you? Who does that? That's where we step in.
Yeah, agreed.
So without any names or specific details, it really ain't easy.
It ain't easy. Exactly. So we've talked the last couple of podcasts about the exterior of the home. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the interiors of the home. And on the very first podcast that we did, we talked about the fact that I lived in 4 different homes when we were in Lindsey, Ohio. They were the 1868 that Eric and I have talked about a lot, 2 that were built in the 50s, and maybe the other one that I lived in was in the 50s. I frankly don't know the date of that one. That being said, we were talking about the interior walls today, and we kind of assumed that all of those were plaster walls. So those plaster walls were painted, they were paneled. We painted over wallpaper. When I lived on Lynn Street and when I was married, it was flocked wallpaper. And then there were some that were just white, like the first house on Main Street that we lived in. And Eric, do you remember? I know you were like a baby there. You were like 6 when we moved, but what do you remember about that house on Main Street?
You know, that is, okay, I remember one time specifically at the big archway that went between the dining room and the living room, because that was one of the things that I think stood out in that house to me. The bland colors, and I know you said white, but I think it was some sort of a cream.
It probably was.
And of course, like we all have different shades of white. Is it rice paper? Is it whole milk? Is it latte? Is it whatever?
My ceiling's whipped cream.
There you go. See, eggshell. But besides that, every room was differentiated by an archway. You went from the kitchen into the dining room, and it was a narrow archway. And when I say narrow, I'm thinking, kind of saying it was about 4 feet wide.
4 feet. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Right. And then, but the archway to the main living room was twice that wide.
Yeah.
And went out into what I consider to be a huge living room.
Oh, I could do cartwheels in that living room.
I mean, it went across the entire
house,
which I figure was close to 40 feet, right?
That's what I was thinking, for about 40 feet probably.
And so you could do a couple of cartwheels in there.
Yeah, more than one. Yeah.
And that space right off of there really wasn't anything that we used that I remember. That part, but that transition between the dining room and that part of the room, it was open. And that's just where we walked through to go to the front door or to go up the stairs.
I don't remember if there was any furniture there. And so to your point, even though the walls were neutral, the archways,
I'll say design elements.
Made it more interesting, right?
Yeah. I mean, we had the doorways, but we had archways, and there was one, even the tried to say it, built-in bookshelf.
Oh, yeah.
Was an arched bookshelf in the living room. And it wasn't like it was deep. That was only 6 or 8 inches deep. It's not like you were putting the Encyclopedia Britannica, which was a thing when we were kids, on those shelves. The most prominent thing that I remember on there was the remote control for adjusting the aerial or the TV antenna.
The TV antenna. Yeah.
And when everybody left the room, I had to give it a shot. So there were times when everybody's out of the room and I would grab it. I mean, it had that kind of electrical energy. You could feel it.
Yeah. So would you call that shape like the top of a minaret kind of? Like, weren't they kind of pointy at the top?
No, the kitchen was. We had that typical thing above the kitchen sink.
Okay.
But that itself was just a smooth archway, which kind of replicated the archway that went into the dining room.
Okay. Well, the point in all of that is to think about what interior walls look like. And again, if you're watching this, then you can see that my interior walls, this is called shortbread cookie, you guys. And I have an archway and we have corbels from that old house in the archway, but it's a neutral color, unlike Eric, who has painted walls.
I consider this, and I picked this color specifically because I call it Coca-Cola yellow. That is not what it was bought at, but little known, as much as we think of Coca-Cola as red and white, their delivery trucks in the 1950s and 40s were yellow.
Okay.
And they had the wood hand carriers that you could carry Coke in were bright yellow. So the walls, because sitting opposite from me, which you can't see, is a 1939 Coca-Cola sign made in Conshohocken, Ohio. It was the first Coca-Cola paraphernalia I ever bought.
So our walls are pretty neutral with the paint, neutral as far as what the finishes are. But that house, when we bought it, when Dad bought it, the 1868 house, we had flocked wallpaper in the dining room with like wainscoting partway up or paneling, little.
It was 1970s paneling is what I consider that to be. I mean, and I say that 1970s because I think 1970s paneling was distinctly different than 1950s paneling, because another one of those features we had at the old house with the wall treatment was that dining room breakfast nook area that we had off of the kitchen. And number one, I'm thinking about that some more, going, that was a tight space. Could an adult even get in alongside the table or down to the far end? Dan, I know, had to be the one to squeeze in down there at that far end. But those walls were more of a true wood look paneling that were halfway up. It was even had that little bit of a sculpted wood to it. So you had the panel and then you had like a 1-inch piece in between that had a little bit of
So, and then the house, the dining room with the wainscoting, with the flocked wallpaper and the glitter that Dad blew on the ceiling when we did that.
That's right. We did the sweeping plaster ceiling with the glitter gun or the glitter cone.
But our games were stored underneath where that paneling was. There was a handle there where you could open, and that's where we kept our games, which we used a lot in the winter at the dining table, right?
That's right. The secret space.
The secret space.
That's where Harry Potter lives.
Oh yeah. Who didn't even know? He wasn't even born then. So, and in the living room, the other thing I remember is when Mom and Dad wallpapered the living room, some of the corners there had carved in designs that in the plaster, right? In the
plaster work there at the bay window.
Yep. Right. They had to try to cut and fit the wallpaper in those little places. And then not to mention the kitchen, which the kitchen was a marvel of 1970s. The fact that you could get wallpaper to match a sheeted vinyl product flooring. Okay. So there was a time, and I don't want to make you emotional, but when Tracy and Troy would come over to the house, and I had Tracy convinced that we had mirrors on the walls that just picked up and reflected. Now I say convinced, he could have just played along, but it's like the number of times we had that discussion, it's like, no, this isn't wallpaper. These are mirrors. You're awful.
And it's picked up I know, I'm just telling you.
So for those of you that grew up with us and that lived in Lindsey, you know that home is now on the market. It's been lived in by a hoarder and it's a mess. And yet we looked at the photos, you guys, the flooring is still there from 1973. I can't tell how gold it is or how faded it is, but it's the same flooring, which shows how durable they made things, right?
Well, how durable and how well Mom and Dad took care of it.
True.
You might have been out of the house, but I remember Dad used to go get this special double rotary brush scrubber from Noss's. hardware and bring it in, and we'd have to scrub that whole thing to get all the little grooves and stuff that you would not put on your floor nowadays because of how much dirt it's going to trap.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're talking floors, not walls.
I know. Anyway, so the walls had wallpaper. So Eric, what about now? Like what do you see in Texas, or what's happening with walls?
Again, you talked about the plaster, and the officially that's considered a Lathe and Plaster wall system is what we had. Nowadays, depending on what part of the country you're in, maybe different terminology. Drywall, sheetrock, gypsum board, all of it is a pre-made material that comes in sheets. If you're doing it from like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, they're typically 4x8, about the same size as a sheet of plywood. If you're having a professional do it, they can get slightly larger sheets that are up to 10 foot so that you can cover more space and have less work to do with what they refer to as taping and floating. Typically, it's about 3/8 of an inch thick going on top of the frame. As I just said, they tape and float, they texture it. And I would say of all of the houses coming on the market right now, if it's a new build, it's sheetrock, drywall, taped and floated, textured, neutral paint color, and it's done. And the walls, the ceilings are all painted the same color. They have somebody come in with a spray and they spray the thing. And we use what they refer to as a drag finish. So they put a texture on and then they take a large plastering blade and just kind of drag it down. So it's not a heavy texture. Yep, it's just mostly up and down. It's a heavy texture. Some of the older houses have some orange peel. And then, of course, if you're doing any renovations or when you're starting to personalize, you're putting up an accent wall. Wait.
So because you mentioned orange peel, because we have that too, but I was telling you earlier that I always call it crushed grapes, because to me, it sounds way more fun to think about people stamping grapes. And
you're picturing Lucille
wine.
Ball making grapes. You know, that's one of the number one. That's one of the number one episodes of that show ever.
More than
Lucy in Italy stomping grapes.
Orange peel. Anyway, we had the same thing here. And when I walk into a home in Tucson, I can kind of tell when it was built based on, the texturing used on the walls. And I was looking up this morning. So I'm assuming that if you're watching this, that you can't look at my walls and see the texture, right? You mostly just see the color. What they use here is what's called hawk and trowel. I don't know why. Like, I know they have a trowel. I know that.
Hawk and trowel?
Yeah. Yeah. And they go back and forth.
Like clearing your throat?
No, not hawk. Hawk, like the bird. Anyway, but this is, and it's on all my ceilings. It's on all my walls. It's everywhere in the house. Exactly the same thing. Who knows what they used before, but when I came in, again, I had a lot of color. You remember my last house where I had a red wall when you came in the front room, and I had what I called stingray yellow in the kitchen. So you and I both like a lot of color. This time I did it all neutral so that my artwork and things could reflect the color. But also it's kind of a trend, right? When you go into a new home right now, the walls are not all different colors. There may be shiplap. Who's that couple?
That's giving a shout out to Chip and Joanna Gaines from Waco.
Yeah.
He's the one. But I mean, everything they do now when you do a wall, it's obviously artificial shiplap. They get some sort of inexpensive pine. They put a stain on it, maybe a couple of different shades of stain, and nail it to the wall.
Yeah. But we don't see that so much out here. We have whatever might come along with the Native American techniques, or Mexico, or things like that. So there's some random things like that, but mostly, and especially when I go into a new build and it's gray, white, and black, right? Even, and then, if you're lucky, you get a green plant. So I sound really negative when I say that. And I don't mean to do that, but as people that love color, that's, fascinating to me. So, and this is over drywall. This is a mud over drywall. This is not plaster.
And, I had some clients who it was not a custom build, but they were doing a lot of customization onto the house. Mm-hmm. And he wanted smooth walls, and they wouldn't do it.
That I don't even know how
they would not do it, because the whole thing about texturing is it covers up those imperfections that you can't get with the smooth wall. And they were willing to pay, and they still wouldn't do it.
Wow. I can't imagine just painting paintings, just trying to get straight lines. I don't know how artists do that. That is such a thing. And to me, it goes back to cutting bangs. You just keep cutting it, hoping that you get shorter and shorter, and that's why there's a whole bunch.
It works for me.
Yeah, there you go. There's a whole bunch of us with pictures in the 60s where our mothers thought they could cut our hair and, made it look up.
Hey, your boys look that way too. I'm just saying.
Hey, stop it. That could be true. You and I talked about, and I'm going to throw this out there. So last year I had a roof leak. I had about 10 inches of water on the flat part of my roof and had to have a whole lot of the house redone. And I was displaced for about 4 months. And what I found out was up to 78 or 80, they still had asbestos in the drywall. So my house had to have the drywall tested. I was gone for 4 months. They had to come in here with their hazmat suits and all of that. I didn't know there was asbestos in here when I bought it, and most of my neighbors didn't know, and many of them have lived here a lot longer than me. But it's just another thing to think about when you start to remodel, right? So we, as agents, the more we know, the more we can share based on the age, of the home that people are coming into and what they might be getting into. Eric's cat's back on his lap, for those of you who are not visual.
This is a different one, though. The first one who came to see me was Paisley. This is Gizmo. Cat house.
Okay, I have to tell you, just because your cat walked up, I love that Denise named her new dog Fizbo.
Oh my gosh. I thought she was talking, and then I realized when your comment that she had talked about the fact that it's like, oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, we have another realtor friend.
Other things aside from the texturing and maybe that accent wall, you said something about B-board. I thought backsplash. Some of them are doing a herringbone tile for the accent wall.
Yeah. Or paneling sideways behind your TV. I've seen that. Really, blue seems to be big right now, right?
And where they're just taking decorative trim.
Yeah.
And they're putting that up and creating those frames on the wall.
Yep.
And then maybe putting a little bit of a different color inside the frame or the trim itself to give it a little bit something, but not crazy over the top.
Yeah, they can frame their 60-inch TVs.
Well, okay. So when I was talking about the built-ins, I thought about that.
Yeah.
And nowadays, the built-ins that went in 15 years ago are inadequate.
That is correct.
Everybody is like, oh, we got these built-ins on either side of the fireplace and it's this, and the TV was sitting over here. And it's like, well, but I've got an 80-inch TV now, and that's only a 50-inch space. So what do I do with that?
Yeah.
The number of times where it becomes the stack of game controllers.
Yeah. I think it's important to say that whatever's happening here as far as design is also at the same level probably happening in Texas. And as you and I just saw a house that got flipped back at home happening in Lindsey. So there are trends that are the same regardless of the product that's used on the wall.
Yep.
Right?
White cabinets and neutral gray walls. As much as we talked about just white walls, the new neutral is some shade of gray.
Yeah, that may look okay with tan or gray. Yeah, you're right. It's the neutral of the neutral du jour. Do
you get a lot of are a lot putting in the gray out there, or are you
it's starting to change? It's starting to change again. But I have people who they walk into the house. Depends on the flooring, and are they going to replace the flooring, or are they going to go with the flooring? Flooring will be another conversation another time.
Absolutely, going to have to be another conversation. And of course, old houses, wallpaper is still a thing. Yeah. With the historic homes in San Antonio, there are companies now that are specializing in reproductions. If you've got as much as 6 inches, they will reproduce a wallpaper or a border. I've seen companies going, look, here's the pattern in this fabric. Can we do this as a wallpaper? So they're doing some more extravagant wallpaper that would be more period authentic to a late 1800s, early 1900s house.
I like that. You and I both talked that we hope that that's what happens to the house that we grew up in.
So one of the other things I want to throw, because the Lathe and Plaster design, it was a thicker piece.
Right.
And naturally, that meant a whole lot easier to put holes in and hang stuff in. Whereas sheetrock, you put even the tiniest nail and it's a little bit heavy than whatever you're hanging on it. Now you're getting out an anchor. You're putting in some sort of huge screw for a little 8-inch picture on the wall.
Right. No, you're right.
In order to hold it so while there are some advantages, there are some drawbacks as well.
Exactly. Alrighty, brother. Are we ready to wrap it up?
I think we're there. That's enough for right now. on interior walls. And of course, any single one of these things is going to be enough that we can go into more detail later down the line. But again, just as we wrap up, Donna and I close things out today. Thank you for listening and joining us in our stroll down memory lane. As we wrap up this episode, please keep in mind that our goal is to communicate, educate, and connect with you, our listeners and audience. If you're in Tucson or San Antonio, we are here to help you find that perfect property for your family to call home and create your own lasting memories in. If you're across the United States or around the globe, we are both part of extensive networks of professional real estate advisors, and we would be happy to connect you. Remember, it may be simple, but it ain't always easy. And until next time, I'm Eric.
And I'm Donna.
And we are
Real Siblings.
Every time I think about the places I have known, I realize that times have changed. So I'll do what I can to make this house into a home. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for taking your valuable time to listen to Real Siblings, It Ain't Easy. We hope you found this episode informative and enjoyable. There are several ways you can support us, and we ask that you please take the time to like, subscribe, and follow. Additionally, leave us a 5-star rating along with a review on your preferred podcast platform. The final thing we would ask is that you recommend this podcast to a friend, a family member, or an associate. Your engagement is critical to our ongoing success, and we look forward to connecting with you. Check out the show notes for all of our contact information, including emails, phone numbers, and websites. The Real Siblings look forward to hearing from you.